Oh, I don't see
Those
her.
and then you right click on her. And,
oh, she's an attendees. That's why.
yes. You just have to promote her.
Promote to panelist. Got it. Right. Okay. Now I know how to do that. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. There she is.
Hi, Beth.
Hello.
So we're still missing David, I guess.
I see somebody else just came in. I think I have control of my mouse again.
Okay.
We are on YouTube Live as we speak, but if you'd like to wait for Councilmember Naidoo.
Give him another minute, I guess.
Okay.
Well, I guess we could start with the, with all the formalities and go from there. All right.
Here he is. He just entered.
Okay. Do you have him?
I do.
Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, Council President, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 Capital Budget Workshop. First of all, do I have a motion? I guess I need a motion, right, to open? Need a motion, Rosie?
Yes, you do need a motion.
Okay, do I have a motion to open the meeting?
So moved.
Moved.
Okay, in a second.
Second.
Okay, great. And Madam Clerk, could you please read the adequate notice?
Yes. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the City Clerk's Office in preparation of a special meeting notice dated November 18, 2020, which set forth the date, time, and place of this meeting, and by properly posting and distributing such notice per statutory requirements.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. And now, if everyone, okay, roll call first, please, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Bowman?
Here.
Ms. Hairston?
Here.
Ms. Little?
Here.
Mr. Naidoo?
Here.
Mr. O'Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Vartan?
Present.
President Fox?
Here. Okay, if everyone could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
So, Madam Clerk, please read the explanatory note.
For those members of the public who wish to ask a question during the workshop, please use your raise hand feature and you will be called upon by the council president. Unless you're using an electronic device for professional emergency contact purposes, please turn it off. And lastly, we ask that all participants remain on mute unless called upon to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I'm going to start by introducing our city administrator, Michael Rogers, who will start by giving us an overview of the capital budget. Michael?
Yep. Thank you, Council President. And Rosie, if I can bring that up or...
Michael, you're going to share your screen.
Sharing the screen. And of course, it's not showing on my... Hold on.
And you're going to open.
Hold on. Let me... Yep. Okay, let's...
Just go into your computers if you're going to open up the application. There you go.
Okay. Okay, so in true 2020 form, we're doing our budget presentation virtually, and this isn't the first one that's been done this year, so we've got some experience in this. So I'm just going to go over quickly this is the agenda for those in the attendees. We go through the budget. I'll go quickly through the budget process that we go through every year, and then I'll go to the capital budget 2021 capital budget summary, go over the 5-year plan briefly, and then I'm going to hand it over to our department heads to get into a little bit more detail of their respective capital budgets. And then our CFO, Tammy Baldwin, will end the presentation looking at the city's debt position and provide all the wonderful news in our debt obligations we have to just kind of tie into our capital budget, which is funded by short-term and long-term debt. So I will start by just going over the process. This all begins in September for us. This is the department heads. While we're finishing up the current year, we're getting into the subsequent year budgets in August, and then lasts usually a couple of months that we provide each department head, and then they start giving us their preliminary operating and capital budgets. And then we move on to the respective council committees, whereby they go through their respective operating and capital budgets, fine tune it if there sometimes there's revisions, other times it's just kind of going through it as we close out that respective year, and some changes are made in the first 60-90 days of the subsequent year. And we then are at the public workshop phase of this process. And we're going to go over the preliminary capital budget tonight. This will likely change as we then head on to the next phase, where the Finance Committee will start to meet with the department heads in January, focusing more on the operating budgets with some discussion around capital. But ultimately, it will still reside with the Capital Projects Committee, and then the Finance and Capital Projects Committee chairs, along with the Council President, myself, and this CFO will meet at that point to finalize the capital budget. And then that's pretty much the timeline, and then we'll get back to there should have been another slide here, but in probably the April time period, we will get to the introduction of the municipal budget. That's typically our time frame, second meeting in April. If so desired, we may give just sort of a snapshot of where we are in February to the council and the public on where we stand with the operating budget. So that's just a potential discussion item we may have in February of next year, focusing more on that and just giving everyone an update of how we're progressing through the operating budget. So this is the total numbers of our capital budget, and it's broken into three areas: the current fund, which is the majority of what we're spending in our capital budget plan, then sewer and parking. As you can see, parking, not much going on or being requested for next year, but these are the totals, which by historical standards over the last 5 years, this is a pretty good place to start. We've been much higher in the past, and so I'm satisfied of where we are, but we still have some work to do. But the department heads are going to go over their needs and make the case for those tonight. So this is a comparison to 2020 for these departments, and you can see the differences. DCS, which is typically the largest area, not much of an increase. It's really only about 1,000 over last year. What's being proposed over what was adopted this year. A little more in DCP, community programs, and then some other increases, as you see. As you can see, we finalized our capital budget at 4.18 last for this year. Keep thinking that was last year, 2020. And then here are the utilities, and Aaron will get into why there's a significant increase in the sewer. And that has to do with the joint meeting, three-year capital budget plan, ABC. And then this is the 5-year plan. So sometimes I use interchangeably the capital improvement plan. And what I mean by that is it's the 6-year plan that we are obligated under budget law to provide. given our municipality's size. And so the current, or the what we will be focusing on tonight is 2021, but this is just a summary of what is projected out for 5 years, 2022 to 2026. And then there's a column there that you see PP. Those are prospective projects. Those are projects that we really don't have a specific year that we're targeting, but we in the past have talked about these projects that are out there that we're not sure, but we want to bring it to the attention of the council and the public that they're there, and we could potentially be spending this amount. And for example, in the administration row, you see $1 million, and that's been used for years for a potential revaluation. So it's just, that's what it's for, and we want to just keep that in the consciousness of the council and the public for a potential year that we will eventually get ordered to conduct a reval, but we don't know when that's going to happen. So it's just an estimate. It could be much lower, but that's been sort of a number thrown out there for a number of years about the reval process and cost. And as you can see, the range is anywhere between 5.2 and 5.67 over the next, that 5-year period. So we won't get too much into those, but if there should be, and I think Rosie, you put it in the agenda portion on the website, there's a preliminary 6-year capital plan that lists it with more specificity, the capital projects of improvement plan. So I encourage any of the attendees, if they want to jump on there and look at that, gets into more detail for those areas and specific projects for the departments during that time period. But we're going to focus on 2021 tonight. And this is just the utility ask. Parking, it's not seeing anything, but that doesn't mean that might, next year something could pop up for 2024. But at the moment, there's nothing projected. And as you can see, 3 years. So I mentioned the joint meeting. It's in a 3-year capital project funding plan where all the participating members, there's an obligation, and you see every 3 years you'll see a jump, and that's kind of what you can see in this 5-year plan. And one of those years is next year, so that's why there's the increase. And I'm at the point where I'm going to hand it off, and first up tonight is Chief Evers to go over the fire department's capital plan. And I will just be controlling this, Chief, so just let me know when you want to move on from each slide.
Great. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council President, members of the Common Council. I appreciate the opportunity tonight to have the fire department present their 2021 capital request. It's been a challenging year. One of the things that we looked at with a lot of our chief officers, our 4 battalion chiefs and their deputy are responsible for a lot of the requests tonight. They manage certain projects, certain items that keep the fire department running. So we sat down with our team early on and really looked at what our exact needs were. We know it's a challenging year, economy-wise and budget-wise. So we kind of really looked at the things that we really need. We thought they were critical to bring to the presentation tonight in order to maintain operations and the service expectations from the city and also the citizens of the summit. So we'll go over a little bit of the item that we're looking to do. So Mike, you can go to the next slide if you would. All right, so one item that we have, certain requests we have are this reoccurring items that occur every year. Every couple of years, almost every year, we just have a little small item to maintain the equipment. And every maybe 4 or 5 years, we do a little more increase to bring a lot of our gear up to standard. So one of our goals a couple of years back was to outfit each firefighter with 2 sets of turnout gear. Years ago, 1 set was sufficient, but with the changing building construction and a lot more toxins and chemicals and makeup of smoke and fire these days, there's a lot more chemicals that was years ago. And so it's very important to keep our firemen safe. By doing that, typically out of every fire we go to, we have to take the gear out of service, wash it, decon it. It's a slow process. Turnout gear is a big investment, so it takes a while to get it cleaned and dried properly. So while that happens, the firemen still need gear to operate in. So the new kind of standard we're doing is having each fireman with 2 sets of gear. So this year is probably the last year that if this goes through, we will have, each farm will have 2 sets of turnout gear that they can have to operate in throughout their shift. That's something that we feel is pretty critical to have that going. And it's also the amount of time it takes to completely service the gear. It does take a little time, like I said before, to clean it, to wash it, to dry it. And during the out of service time, firemen's tooling gear to go on. So we're looking at that. Another big reoccurring expense we have every year is fire hose. Fire hose gets used a lot. It also gets beat up a lot, a lot of bad condition. So on top of this, the normal wear and tear of replacing damaged fire hose, we also every so often have to replace a large amount of hose. Our fire hose gets tested for NFPA requirements every year. We go through a pressurized test and a physical inspection. And from that, sometimes hose is decommissioned. There's also a 10-year NFPA requirement. And also we're receiving a new fire engine beginning of 2021. And some of that hose will be to outfit that new fire truck. So that's where the $50,000 comes into place. Part of it for getting the hose for our new fire truck. And the other part of it is just to replace hose that did not pass our inspection and some damage hose throughout the year. Okay, Mike. Okay, another item we have is our current incident command vehicle is approaching 9 years old. It's our frontline piece. Our incident commander uses this vehicle to respond to all emergency calls. He is the frontline supervisor. He sets the tone and the pace of all calls, especially major fires. And over the last year and a half, that vehicle had become very unreliable. And as soon as last night, again, was a reminder that call came in, the incident commander got in the vehicle and it had issues, he could not take the vehicle. So it's just been deemed unreliable due to that frontline vehicle. So we're looking to replace that vehicle this year. There would be some cost savings in next year's capital request. We do have another vehicle that goes to fire prevention. And if we replace this vehicle this year, we can make some repairs on the current incident command vehicle, and we can bring that down to fire prevention. They can use that as a fire prevention vehicle down the road. So, but we do feel that replacing it this year the need is there. It's because it has become so unreliable for the vehicle. Okay, Mike. Okay, the next piece is rescue equipment. We still continue to keep up our technology with our rescue equipment. A lot of rescue equipment does go through use. A lot of car accidents, areas in town they use quite often, and there's a lot of upgrade and safety features that our rescue equipment goes through all the benefactors. So we're looking to upgrade rescue equipment, and also our small equipment, things like chainsaws, axes, hand tools. That also maintains that small equipment line item every year as we go to the calls, and that equipment gets worn out, utilized. A lot of it is inspected every year for requirements. A lot of them don't fit past the test, so we have to make sure we have enough money in our budget to maintain those equipment when they break down throughout the year. Okay, Mike, you can go on. All right, the last piece we have, our request is our tablets. Every frontline vehicle that responds to emergencies has a CAD tablet that syncs with Mountain Valley Dispatch Center with their every call we come in comes on the CAD, it comes on a screen, and all that information is carried to the vehicles when they leave the building, en route, and when they get on call. And a lot of valuable information comes across the tablets. Any special hazards with any particular building in town, cross streets, hydrant locations. There's some mutual aid requests, we can go through that. So our tablets are the original tablets that we had when the dispatch center first came to operation years back. And with modern technology and the new CAD systems, our current computers cannot keep up with the loading of it. A lot of them are actually out of service. So our request is to replace all the CADs and all the frontline vehicles to bring us up the current standards, and also so we can be replaced in one to meet the new demands of the new CAD systems we have. So, all right, and that is it for my presentation tonight. I'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody has on any of the items we discussed. All right, hearing none. Thank you. I appreciate.
I got one.
Sure.
Councilmember Vartan, you had your hand raised?
Oh, there you go.
I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. So I have a couple questions. The first is the incident command vehicle. Were you saying that vehicle would go to become the fire prevention vehicle and replace the $60,000 that's in the budget for next year?
Yes, yeah. So if you look at my 5-year capital plan, 2021, we do have a fire prevention vehicle that's up for replacement. The goal, the be that we can take this current vehicle and pass that down to fire prevention, and that's the one item that we can save money on the 2021 capital request. So we would remove that vehicle for that year, and we would bring this current vehicle down and use that for the time being.
Okay, great. And then a second is roughly how long would you imagine the tablets would last?
I think they're 6 years old now. This is the first time we've actually used them. The PD the police, I think, have used them more than we have, but we just started using them since the dispatch center came online. So that's around 6 years, I believe it was. So I would say it's probably about 5 years. It's probably 5-6 years life expectancy of them. So, but we really don't have too much back history. It's the first time we're going to replace the whole entire fleet. So they serve us well, but they're just getting old. A lot of them don't work anymore. They take long periods of time to pull up data, so they're just kind of outlived their life.
Yep, and just for the people watching, I guess, they give you information about the call that has been received, right? So it really actually does help a lot to
it does
paint a picture of what you're about to walk into.
Yeah, so every time we hear dispatch or any kind of call, emergency or non-emergency, all that information is initially gathered at the Mountain Valley Dispatch Center. They process the call, and then they put that information out. If there are a CAT system, which come to a firehouse, we do have a big screen on our engine room floor that shows the call. It has the address of the call, the nature of the call, a lot of special needs with commercial buildings. Some people in homes have medical needs. That information is all relayed. It also gives us a hiding location for water supplies, set first, secondary, and third. It also gives us cross streets and the numbers of the building. It also gives us any kind of additional information like emergency contact information. That's all in part of that CAD. And then as you go to the call, the incident commander pushes the button that tells us that we're responding. When we get on scene, it marks us on scene. It actually tracks us from the beginning to the end of the incident. And any information that we need further in that, we can also gain through that CAD. So the incident commander can kind of take over to alleviate some stuff from dispatch center and work off that CAD screen.
Thank you.
Councilmember O'Sullivan.
Yes, thank you, Council President. And thank you, Chief. That was a great presentation, very informative. I was just wondering, especially as it pertains to the turnout gear and the fire hose and the tablets, what kind of grant money is available, maybe even federal grant money for those kinds of things? I wouldn't imagine that there would be money available for a command vehicle, but what about the safety gear and things like that?
Yeah, so we have been working with Topology. We have been working with Millennium, our grant writers, to get some grants. We do take advantage of when we can. It's hit or miss. We have been successful in the past on getting some grants. We do have some grants now that are in waiting to be awarded. They're smaller, a couple sets. But anytime we do have an opportunity, we do take advantage of it. It's more so with the turnout gear and the SCBA. You see a lot of grants for it, but any opportunity comes along, we get it. Like I say, it's usually hit or miss. We just had some grant that we did not receive through the FEMA Assistant Firefighter grant, but we do take opportunity though anytime we get a chance to get grant assistance when possible.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, Councilmember Bowman, did you have questions?
I do. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Hey, I got two quick questions, I think. Turnout gear. When we have employee turnover, i.e. a retirement or whatever, is that gear, unique to that individual, or is that handed down to new people, or does a new hire get new gear?
Yeah, it depends. If the gear is at its lifespan, it is decommissioned, sometimes we'll just hand it over. Most of the gear, as long as it's still within the time frames and it passes inspections, we keep that gear in service. We don't get rid of it. A lot of times, some of the gear that is replaced, we'll hand it down to our volunteers. But as long as it's within that lifespan of the gear and it passes yearly inspections, we keep that gear as long as we possibly can.
Oh.
So a lot of times, the firemen use a lot more than a volunteer, so we'll pass it down to volunteers. Some of the stuff we can use for training, we do a lot of live burn training with the volunteers. So instead of them ruining their frontline gear, we can hand down some gear that may be like 7, 8 years old, that's approaching the end of the lifespan. We'll have them use that gear instead of bringing their new gear to the fire academy. So we keep it as long as we possibly can. Just because of the expense of it. It is expensive, and a lot of the gear now is just like you would have a fine suit. It's custom fit to certain individuals. So a lot of it kind of is spec for individuals to use, but we also, share it across all the guys in the department. So
Good, good. And my second question is on the vehicle, $80,000. I know we're replacing a couple police vehicles for in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. And, I'm sure this is tricked out a little bit, but is 80,000 a fat number, or is that been researched?
it's a little bit. You don't want to come back again and ask for more money. So it is a little number that we've got, maybe a slight bit high, but the command vehicle does have a lot of specialized equipment in it. It also has a big command cabinet in the back of it. It also has, other than our normal radios, it has a lot of other frequencies throughout the county. It also has a computer in the back that has computer equipment in it on top of the CAD system, the incident command vehicle, and also log into certain websites within the city and also certain servers within the city, so we can gather building information, building intelligence, all our pre-planned information. So there is a lot of other specialized computer equipment that aren't in the rest of the vehicles. So that came to be about a $30,000 expense. So the vehicle is probably about $45,000 plus about another 30 with all the other equipment. That's how we kind of got to about the $80,000 number. But then again, we also buy from state contracts. So that also we get a better deal with state contract purchasing for vehicles. So
Appreciate
like leave a little bit of wiggle room in that dollar amount that we present.
All right. Thank you.
Not much though. Yep. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Chief Evers? I don't see any other hands up. Okay, so I guess, thank you very much, Chief Evers.
Thank you. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Madam President, members of council, and the public. Thank you for the opportunity tonight to present the police department's capital budget request for 2021. Mike, you can go ahead, please. Our capital budget, excuse me, is totaling $157,000. And what the command staff did this year is we got together and looked at all of our essential needs versus our items that we would look to introduce into the department, and recognizing that it was a tight budget year for 2020 and presumably into 21, we drastically cut that list of equipment and items that were deemed essential, and that is what I will be presenting on tonight. Slide, please. So we have three categories that we're looking at for our 21 capital budget. Our frontline police vehicles, which for frontline, for definition purposes, that is going to encompass all of our marked police vehicles that are in our patrol division and our traffic division. Also, we're looking at network server upgrades to upgrade the physical servers themselves, the software that runs those servers, as well as some hardware switches and wiring within the police department network. And finally, replacement of the traffic variable message board. So starting off with the frontline police vehicle replacement program, we're requesting for $110,000 for this project cost. And the vehicle replacement model that's in use by the police department is based mainly on a two-pronged approach. The first being to maximize the lifespan of each vehicle while keeping the frontline vehicles operational at all times. And the second prong to that is to maximize the purchasing power within our budget. And that dates back to about 2014 when the police department transitioned from a model of purchasing vehicles outright to a lease purchase program. And just to clarify what lease purchase, I'm not sure exactly why Ford mentions the word lease in this program. We're not actually leasing the vehicles. We are financing the vehicles over a 3-year period. And at the end of that 3-year period, there's a dollar buyout similar to a leasing program. But nonetheless, they do call it a lease purchase option. The lease purchase option associated with each vehicle is spread over a period of 3 years, as I mentioned, and has that term buyout at the end. And what happens after we buy that out, that vehicle stays within our fleet, and depending on the mechanical notion of the vehicle and depending on the age of the vehicle, we'll either keep that into the frontline vehicle fleets, or we'll move that down the line into one of our support vehicles, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The requested funding of 110 takes in consideration a couple of things. It takes into consideration the contractual annual amount that will be due in 2021, and that's based on vehicles that were acquired in 2019 as part of this 3-year lease purchase option. So we do have I'll call it a lease payment. We do have a lease payment due in 21 that the city is obligated for. And it will also cover replacement vehicles that were due to get replaced in 2020, as well as 2021. And as you noticed in the beginning slides, there was no capital budget request in 2020 coming out of the police department. So the requested amount also reflects equipping all of those vehicles with the emergency lighting packages and equipment that goes into them. Now, some of the equipment that will be going into these new vehicles is taken from some of the vehicles that we decommission, which I'd like to touch on a little bit. And also, we reflected a 10% increase from the 2019 pricing off a state contract. And in 2021, we're going to be exploring hybrid vehicles as well, which also has a higher cost than the standard vehicle. Now, when I talk about relocating equipment from a decommissioned vehicle to a new vehicle, I just want to clarify that a lot of the equipment that is in our frontline vehicles is not being transferred from one vehicle to the other. And to clarify that a little further, typically what happens is our frontline vehicles will stay in the front line within the Patrol and Traffic Bureau for a period of about 3 to 4 years. And that period of 3 to 4 years puts about 75 to 85,000 miles on a vehicle. So at that age of a vehicle, although relatively young, the mileage is quite high. The repair costs kind of get up there. So typically around the 3rd or 4th year is when we take a vehicle off the front line. And as long as it's mechanically sound, we transfer that vehicle down to a support vehicle in our extra duty program. So the vehicles that are out on a lot of the road construction jobs are decommissioned frontline vehicles that get stripped of all their equipment, get put in a new vehicle, and then come down to the support vehicles in the extra duty program. And at the time that those vehicles get decommissioned, which is typically around 7 to 8 years since date of purchase, there's really nothing to pull out of those vehicles at that point that can be reused. Mike, slide, please. Next project that we're looking at that's imperative for us to get done in 2021 is the replacement of our network servers and upgrade to the software on that servers. The infrastructure for the department's network was brought online in 2014 and has performed beyond industry standards of about 4 to 5 years, which is typically the replacement period. We have contracted with our IT support company called QuickTex, and for 2020, when we were looking to replace these and budget for them out of operating with the restrictions that we had in 2020, they had made some Band-Aid fixes, if you will, to the servers to get us through to this point, which we should get us about another 6 months or so of life expectancy out of them before we really have to replace things. So funding in the amount of $30,000 is being requested to support not only the acquisition and installation of the new servers, but also to replace the outdated software that is on them, which is a 2012 operating system, upgrade some network switches, and upgrade some internal wiring within the police department to higher speeds. Next slide, please. And finally, the third project that we're looking to accomplish in 2021 is the replacement of our variable message board that's in use daily by our traffic unit. This replacement has an estimated cost of about $17,000 based on state contract numbers for 2020. And it's replacing a board that we purchased back in 2001 and has since been decommissioned and is unable to be repaired at this point. Also, the newer boards with advancements in technology, the new boards incorporate cloud-based computing, which allows our traffic supervisors to be able to launch and program these message boards from virtually anywhere with an internet connection, which has proven very useful for us in the past couple of years. I think that's my last slide, Michael, if I'm not correct. Yep. So that's the 3 items that we've cut down to what we deemed essential for 2021. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this point.
Thank you, Chief Bartolotti. Does anyone from the council have any questions? I think I saw Councilman Burr Vartan's hand up.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Chief. Just a couple quick questions. How many police vehicles do we have total?
So, we have, I'll give it to you in a breakdown, which might help. So I classify, we have 12 frontline vehicles, and that's broken down into 8 within the Patrol Bureau, 2 within the traffic unit, and then 2 supervisory vehicles between those 2 bureaus. We have 10 support vehicles, and that's broken down into 5 coming out of the Detective Bureau, 3 administrative, and 2 support vehicles that are patrol traffic, and that's our pickup truck and a transport vehicle as well. Then our EDA fleet, we have 5 decommissioned frontline vehicles, and those vehicles range anywhere from 6 to 8 years old. Those are the vehicles that you'll see out on the road jobs, and the city bills the contractors for use of those vehicles, so that comes in as revenue for the city. And then on top of that, we've had the 2 motorcycles that were donated to the department, and our DARE vehicle was a donation, all from residents within the community.
Okay. And then the other quick question is that the variable message board, is that ever used? Does it ever have emergency use, or is it just sort of like a, for messaging about the things to be aware of?
Yeah, so our main purpose for these boards are for emergency messaging usage, but because they are so versatile, we use them for daily messaging as well. The board that we're looking to replace it does not have newer technology in it. Obviously, built in 2001, required manual input of messaging, somebody physically going out to that board. It's created a lot of issues for us, and at this time, it is completely out of service. We do have 1 message board that is in operation. We've always had 2 since 2001. And basically the way we deploy them on just general days is they're both deployed in opposite ends of town, unless there's something specific going on that we need to redirect them. Obviously, emergency usage. This new technology ties into statewide systems that you'll see digital boards out on highways and so on and so forth. That we can get messaging real quick with cloud-based computing at this point.
That's cool. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of the council? Councilmember O'Sullivan, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President. Chief, thank you. It was a great presentation. I just had a question. You mentioned hybrid vehicles and how they're going to cost a little more. I just was curious, are those going to be vehicles that could be on the front line? Would they have the chasing power? And also, are they going to end up paying for themselves in gas savings? And do you imagine a time in the near future where all of the fleet is either hybrid or even all electric?
I think at this point it's too early to say regarding electric. There's not enough information out there on police pursuit vehicles regarding that just yet. With regards to hybrid, it's my understanding there's actually just a few that just entered into the county law enforcement community just this year. So I have to say that I don't have all the information just yet on the hybrid vehicle, but I think it's something that we do need to look at for although it does cost a little bit more, and the cost differential right now, it's not drastic. It's about $3,000 from a standard vehicle on the lease purchase program. Obviously, on the outright purchase, it does raise the cost a little bit. But we want to look at that as a viable option to see if that's a direction we can go in. Summit's community and the landscape of Summit is not such that we need pursuit vehicles. We're not doing highway pursuit, so to speak. But we do want to make sure that it can function at the need that it does. So there's a lot of testing data that we want to look at. And because of the budget cycle that we're on, if this request is approved, we have quite a few months to kind of get that data together to see if that's the avenue you want to go in. But I think, at this point, similar to as Chief Evers said, if that is a direction that we do want to go in, we don't want to have to come back and ask for more money. So the 110 builds in a little bit of cushion there that if we do go in that direction, if we need to.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of council? Any comments or questions from members of the public? Thank you very much, Chief Bartolotti. I don't think there are any other questions. I'm very pleased to hear that you are considering hybrid vehicles, and I think it's a direction that we should be looking at for the whole city fleet. So thank you for looking into that.
Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, so I guess we're on to community programs now.
Great, good evening. Thank you, Michael. I would like to thank Mayor Radis, Council President Fox, and all the members of the council and City Administrator Rogers for the opportunity to present the 2021 capital budget for the Department of Community Programs. Before I start, I would also like to publicly thank my staff, Chris Holenstein, David Guida, Gretchen Masterfano, Nolister Montas, Maria Hughes, and all of our part-time staff who are able to continue offering great programming, special events, opening the Aquatic Center and the municipal golf course, while following the strict COVID-19 guidelines that were put in place throughout the year. We had the never say never attitude and did our best to have the most normal year as possible for the residents of the state. I've said it before, but we are one of the departments in the city that serves every age group in town. Whether it's a family with a 6-month-old and a toddler enjoying the community pool or visiting one of our playgrounds, or a senior citizen playing a round of golf at the Muni or riding the Senior Connection bus, or an elementary, middle school, or high school athlete playing on our fields or using our facilities. In order to keep all of our constituents happy and to encourage new families to move into the city, we cannot stay stagnant and we must continue to improve all of our facilities. In 2020, our new Senior Connections bus hit the road, which has made our seniors extremely pleased. And we were able to resurface the Summit Family Aquatic Center, which will absolutely make our members very happy and excited come the 2021 season. Our plan for this coming year is to upgrade both the Memorial and Tatlock basketball courts, resurface the Investors Track, along with starting the discussion about the possibility of lighting Investors Field and Tatlock Field. You can scroll it, Mike. This year's total requests comes out to a little over $1.3 million. Scroll it. Priority 1 for this year is the Maybe Playground and Basketball Court. Priority 1A is the Anderson Fieldhouse Study and Design. Priority 2 is the Wilson Paddle Tennis Court repairs. Priority 3 is the Community Center grading. And 3 other priorities that we have this year is the showmobile replacement, annual park furnishing replacements, and security cameras. Scroll down, please, Michael. My first request for 2021 is the Maybe Playground and Basketball Court for $700,000. The actual price tag for this project will be close to $1 million once completed, but we are willing to fundraise through corporate, nonprofits, and private donations, along with applying for the many grant opportunities that are out there. 3 out of our 4 playgrounds that we are responsible for are over 15 years old, with Maybe receiving its last major renovation in 1998. Not only can we not get parts to maintain these playgrounds, but quite frankly, they are boring and outdated. We're at the point where I know a number of families that travel to other communities in order for their kids to play on a newer state-of-the-art playground. Our goal is to make all of our playgrounds equipped with the most modern technology, completely ADA compliant and sensory friendly. So all residents of Summit will be proud and will be able to enjoy these facilities. Maybe Playground and Basketball Court is the most heavily used and is right in the middle of town. I can't think of a better way to showcase our great city to our existing residents and their friends, as well as attracting new families that are looking to move into town. Westfield put their new playground in at Mindowaskin Park in December of 2018 for a little under $900,000. If Westfield can do it, Summit can do it. Scroll down, Michael, please. My second request, or 1A, is the Anderson Fieldhouse Study and Design for $50,000. I've been working for the city for over 20 years. And during these years, we've been placing Band-Aids on this building in order to keep it safe and usable for the Summit High School athletic programs. We're at the point in time that the Band-Aids no longer work. The roof continues to leak. The outdoor and inside restrooms are embarrassing and have plumbing issues constantly. There are broken doors. The HVAC system is average at best and is only in the coaches area. The lighting is poor. There is very limited storage, and the interior can barely accommodate the amount of players and coaches that needs to be in there. My plan is to hire an architect, work with the Summit High School athletic director and coaches to determine a number of different options with cost estimates. Once that process is complete, the city can then determine how the project will be funded. Next slide, please, Mike. My third request is $75,000 for upgrades at the Wilson paddle tennis courts. The last major repair work that was done on the paddle tennis courts was a resurfacing project over 10 years ago. We have seen a steady increase in play to the point where we need to take reservations for people to reserve time. I'm looking to resurface the courts, tighten and replace some of the existing wire that surrounds the courts, which keeps the ball in play but is also necessary for play, paint the entire wooden brown structure, and add a handicapped ramp. This is another facility that has not received a lot of attention over the years and is in desperate need for a facelift. Next slide, please. My fourth request is $275,000 for the community center grading. As we all know and have heard, the community center is an absolute gem for the city, but there's still work that was never completed in the original scope of the project. The back of the building needs to have additional topsoil added and graded to cover an exposed footing on the back of the base of the back of the investor's gym. The longer the footing is exposed to the elements could lead to issues in the future. We also need to have handicap access from both parking lots that will allow individuals in wheelchairs to gain access to the field. Next slide, please. The last three requests and priorities that I have, the first is the Showmobile replacement for $175,000. The Showmobile was purchased in 1993. The average lifespan for a Showmobile is anywhere from 10 to 15 years old. So we definitely got the most out of it. We're having electrical and lighting issues. The floor needs to be replaced, and we are dealing with leaks when it rains. In addition, we have no handicapped access to the stage. With our special events continuing to increase to around 30 per year, we are going to need to replace this vehicle very shortly. Next slide, please. My next request is park furnishings for $10,000. I annually request this money for park amenities, which include benches, trash, recycling containers, signage, bike racks, etc. Next slide. And my final request for 2021 is security cameras for our facilities. As we continue to upgrade all of our facilities, and in particular the aquatic center and the municipal golf course, we need to incorporate security cameras to make sure that we have no safety issues occurring during the off hours of all of our facilities. Thank you all for your time. Does anybody have any questions?
Are there any questions? Thank you for the presentation, Mark. Let's see, Councilmember O'Sullivan, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Mark, for that great presentation. I just had a comment about maybe playground. Unfortunately, I've been, and my wife and I have been one of those families that have taken our kids to another town to enjoy a playground. You know, the best time to redo this playground was probably 5 or 10 years ago. The next best time is 2021. I've been to Westfield to see their playground. I've had people call me to tell me their families have taken day trips to go to other towns and enjoy a playground. This is something that just needs to be upgraded. It benefits everybody in town, not just parents with little kids. It benefits grandparents. I would look at it as an asset for the community. And I have no children that would ever go to this playground. The other thing about Maybe Playground, it's centrally located. Most people could walk there. Kids can come after school. It's just it would be a jewel right in the middle of the Village Green. So I'm in full support of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Sullivan. Councilmember Little.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Mark, for that presentation. I just had a few questions. I agree, in essence, I agree with all the projects that they all need to be done and that they're all important. So my questions are kind of alternate ways of funding them or getting them done and seeing if there's, other ways to do this. So the first is on the Anderson Fieldhouse. I agree. I have 2 college-age students, 2 high school-age students, so I'm well aware of how poorly, and what poor shape that building is in, but it does only serve high school athletes and really high school male athletes. So is there some way that we could work with either the Board of Education or the boosters or the football boosters and transfer ownership of that building to them? It just seems that that's a tricky building to spend city funds on since it's such a limited population that's using it. And I have some other questions too, but maybe we'll go one by one.
I would agree with those comments about the Anderson Fieldhouse. Our programs use it maybe 5% of the time. It's really designed for the high school athletic program. I personally don't think the city should fund the entire project, especially when I'm hearing, I've had initial conversations with coaches, with the athletic director, actually with families, and they're looking to, make this a state-of-the-art facility that's going to cost in the millions, no doubt. We've actually, the DCP advisory board had a guest speaker a guest come in about a year ago and said he was willing to start a fundraising campaign. So I definitely think there's opportunities where the city isn't going to have the burden of paying for the entire project.
Okay, and then I would love for us to continue to look into that because it's such a limited population that uses it. I agree that it needs work, but it's tough to justify in the sense that it's really not a public amenity. It's not going to be end up being a public amenity. Going back to Maybe Playground, I'm fully in support of that. But I'm wondering if, in the same way that we tackled the municipal golf course project last year, if it should be broken into segments. I don't know, but I know a number of years ago we looked at doing some playground work at some of the schools, and it was going to take a while to get the study done and to get renderings and drawings and things like that. Does it make sense to break this into segments and maybe fund the studies and the kind of the renderings and drawings and project and get the project into pictures that the public can see that would help us in fundraising, and then break the project into the younger kids playground and the older kids playground into discrete parts since they are separate and they serve different populations. And maybe that would help us in fundraising and looking at funding this project.
I think it's a good idea. We will be meeting with vendors relatively soon to get some ideas of exactly what's out there. The only issue by putting this off is we have 3 other playgrounds in town that need work. That would be the playground over at Memorial, and it will be the playground over at Upper Tatlock. So if we put this off in stages, we're putting those off and further and further and further out. But it's definitely something we can look at.
And then finally, the grading at the community center. Can you explain to me how that works with the ADA compliance? Because I thought that we designed the community center to be ADA compliant. I'm just wondering why this project is coming up after the project's been completed, and where the ADA compliance and access kind of fits in to the use of the community center.
The current, if you go down Morris Court and you make a left, there is a driveway right by the Natal's house, the first house on your left, where people can drop off anybody that's handicapped, and they can watch the game from down in that area. It's not ideal, but there's no access. If you're in the parking lot over by Bristol Myers Squibb, you have to go in front of our building, eventually get out to Morris Court, make a left, go down, and then make another left to go into the handicapped area down there. So it was never part of the actual building itself, Beth. But we are compliant from that handicapped space down by the Natal's house.
Okay, so this is access to the playing fields, not to the community center itself?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all the questions I had right now.
Yep.
Okay. Councilmember Hairston, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Council President, and thank you, Mark. I really just want to echo the applause for you and your staff during such a tough year. Everybody on the city staff really worked hard to keep things going, but I was just amazed at how the well-being of the town was boosted by all of the work of your department. And I was hoping you could say something about how any of these have taken into consideration COVID safety measures, since we have a new way of life now. And I don't know if the playground equipment or the basketball courts, how are these vendors that you're dealing with thinking about this? And if you could just share. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hairston. No, nothing has been taken into account for COVID-19. Any vendors that I've spoken to haven't even mentioned it. So at this point, there's really not an answer for it.
Okay. Councilmember Bowman.
Excuse me, had it unmute. Thank you, Mark. I have a question, and I think everything is interesting to discuss. My question revolves around the showmobile. Is that the most economic way to do it? I mean, we're not moving it around. Is there a stage or some other way to build a stage in a fashion that is maybe more permanent, or it's some other fashion at a less expensive investment?
Sure. I live down in Mercer County, and in Mercer County Park, they have a stage that's built out of stone, and it's a permanent structure. I have no idea of the cost of that, but I'm sure it's a lot more than $175,000.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Did you have anything else, Councilmember Bowman? Or
No, I don't. I guess, well, maybe, I guess assuming it's more is one thing, but looking at alternatives, I would encourage you to look at alternatives over and beyond just a showmobile replacement.
And just another point, Councilman, we do move the showmobile around periodically, especially July 4th. We have it over at Memorial, and there are times where we have to move it. So if we have a structure that's stationary, we're going to have to figure out something alternatively for different events that we have.
Well, I guess that answers the other question.
I mean, and just thinking off the top of my head, we use it for high school graduation down at Investors. We use it for middle school. So that gets moved around pretty often.
I didn't realize that.
Okay, Councilmember Naidoo.
Thank you, Council President. Let me join in thanking this DCP staff for trying to have as normal a year as possible this year. So thank you, Mark, and thank you for the entire team for doing it. Two comments. I join Councilwoman Little with regard to the issue of the Anderson Fieldhouse. And what I would ask us to, before we spend money on a study, is try to figure out what our options are for dealing with that building. Because I would ask whether we've thought about potentially even selling the building, not just to the boosters or whoever, but maybe you could get a combination of a public-private partnership where you get a concession in there. I mean, there's a lot of people who would benefit, I think, from having actually a proper concession in that building. If you had a 2-story building, let's say, and you had an upstairs, let's say, quasi restaurant or a cafe where you could get some food or do something, and whether there would be somebody interested in doing that in combination with having, you know, the locker rooms and so forth. So I would ask us to think kind of, and maybe you guys have, and you're going to say, David, we did that and it's not going to work or what have you. And that's fine. But I think I'd like to hear more options about that location before we start committing towards spending city funds. And I know the bathrooms there, because I've been there, do need rehabilitating. I know that building needs rehabilitating. It looks terrible. You know, something needs to be done with it. It's just a question of who should do it and pick up the tab for it, essentially, right? So that's, I'm not suggesting you have an answer right now. Maybe you do, but I don't expect you to. So I'm just saying, let's just put as a pin, just think about that. And then I also agree about the maybe playground. I think it's very important that we look at investment in playgrounds as being investment in the property values of our town, right? Because there are a lot of new families coming into town, and part of the attraction of Summit is you coming into this leafy suburb that has the amenities for having families and having kids, you know, be able to play outside and do all of that stuff. But I do think thinking about, especially, and I was going to say this at the end, but I think it's at any point in time would have been perfectly fine to say this. We just have to realize the reality of the financial situation we're living in, right? This budget overall is a $5.1 million budget. Last year was 4.1 or whatever it was, but it's about $1 million more overall in cost estimate. We're living in a time of COVID. We're living in a time where people are unemployed. There are people being thrown out of their houses or what have you. They're worried about making rent. People, you know, worried about their jobs. We just have to live in the reality that we are in 2021. So what Westfield could do in 2018 or some other town could do, and this applies not to you, Mark, but to everybody that you guys are all making. I know this is a preliminary cost estimate, budget, and we're all going to trim it and it's going to get to another number. I know that, but I'm just saying that everybody has to just go in with eyes wide open about this, that this is a different reality. We're going to have to live with that reality. And we'll see where we end up at the end of 2021. But I would say that if we want to move some of these projects still forward in 2021, we just have to figure out how best to chew them rather than maybe in whole. So that would be my suggestion, how we could do that.
Thank you, Councilmember Naidu. Mayor Radis, did you have questions?
Yeah, I just have a comment. First of all, Mark, thank you. And please give our thanks to the staff for everything they've been doing this year, not just running community programs, but all the support that they've given to SHIELD and to Grace Pantry and everything. They've been remarkable. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to just echo about Anderson Fieldhouse. We already, the citizens of this community already pay for all of the education, which is one of the things that it's our responsibility, we should do. But when you can only say that, or not you, but one says that approximately 5% of the people are using the field house now, I'd like to get some negotiations with someone to buy it, because I don't think we should be putting city money into this personally. Why aren't we building a band shell for the musicians? So I just think it's something that we shouldn't be doing this year for sure. And I think I'd love to see us find a way to have the Board of Ed pick it up. Or another organization. It serves their constituents more so than it serves all the citizens of Summit. So I understand it needs work, don't get me wrong, but I'd rather see the money go to maybe where a lot more people use it. Thank you. That's it.
Councilmember Vartan, you had comments or questions?
Yes, thank you, Council President. I have three things. First is thank you, Mark, and the whole team for everything that you've done this year. But I also just want to very briefly draw attention to the fact that programming is continuing through the winter in what will likely be, cold and terrible and, filled with lots of Netflix. You can find yoga and you can find other classes online that are, of course, available and free, and they're pretty much for people of any age. So thanks for that. The second is I agree with virtually everyone else, Beth, David, Nora, about both Anderson Fieldhouse. I am personally pretty excited about the idea of getting, some sort of concession or some other type of, some draw there, which I think would be used not only during games, but, by other people who are playing tennis or just hanging out there. And then the other part of it is, my grandmother, who serves on the DCP board now, used to take us park hopping. And we would go to different parks, throughout a Saturday. And we would always wind up back in Summit because when I was a kid, they were very new. And now I'm not that old, but it's not the case that they're that new anymore. So I agree that, I maybe would be a big priority for me, but that we would just have to try to sort of figure out how we're going to slice it up into multiple years and fundraise and get grant money. The third thing is a question, actually, and it's related to Tatlock. I'm not sure that the people at home are looking at the report that we have, but there's like more than $1 million for Tatlock improvements in 2024, and then another 800,000 in 2025. Is that related to lighting, or is that related to I in addition to just this year, I'm trying to balance between, the idea that whatever we do this year, we don't want to necessarily push off because the requests only go up every year. So I'm just trying to look out a few years to try to project, what are the other projects that are coming up. Can you just speak to that very briefly?
Sure. And as I explained to everybody last year, back in 2018, we had a Tatlock redevelopment plan that was done by Tom Miller, an engineer. I think most of you received copies of that, and it had 14 different projects within that plan to finish out the Tatlock facility. And some of those numbers were replacing the turf. Some was the tennis courts, which we took care of. Speaking of next year, Greg, there was a couple numbers that you had. There's 600,000 for the field house. That was part of the plan. The upper Tatlock lights for 276,000. The 490 was for potentially lighting the Investors Bank Stadium. So all those numbers were part of the master plan, or the redevelopment plan of Tatlock. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Mark, I had a question because there's, Greg is right that in 2024, there's a little over $1 million for Tatlock Park improvements. What is that line?
Give me 1 second. 2024.
And then 820,000 the following year. So we're
there's so many different.
We're close to like $2 million there. So I'm wondering what it is.
So many different pieces to this. 2, 3, 4, and 8. You know what, Council President, might be easier if I go through this plan, because I don't have it memorized off the top of my head, and I can get back to you and give you exact, and
really helpful.
what the money's for, instead of me having to look through this.
Sure, that would be helpful. Thank you. Council members Little and Bowman and Vartan still all have their hands up. Is that just because you haven't taken them down, or you have more questions?
I just didn't take it down.
Okay, just checking. Okay,
Same.
I'll do that now.
okay, thanks. It's just hard with the screen up. I have to rely on hands. Are there anyone else who hasn't commented, who has questions? So thank you so much, Mark. This was very helpful. And I would like to also concur with what most of the other council members have said about maybe playground being something that I think is a priority. And, you know, trying to find ways to fund that, I think makes a lot of sense. And I also agree that Anderson Fieldhouse is not something that I'm comfortable funding in this environment because of the very limited scope of people who use it. And I think that really should be some conversation with the Board of Ed, with the boosters, with the football boosters particularly, and, you know, finding a way to work with them to address this rather than spending city taxpayers' funds on this project. So
And just a final note on that, I'm in total agreement with all of you. You know, it's football in the fall, in the spring it's lacrosse and track. And like I said, we barely use it. The issue for right now, though, is we're going to have to, being that it's a city asset, there are issues that have to get corrected and fixed now. And one in particular is the roof. We've patched that thing. We've put new roofs on it. Since I've been here, it's in bad shape. So we are going to have to put some money into it at this point.
well, is it possible to have a conversation with the Board of Ed about them bearing the cost of some of this, or, you know, or some of these boosters groups looking into this? Because it, you know, I understand it is a city asset, but it really is so, you know, the use is so limited that, you know, it might even be worth selling it for $1 at this point.
Right.
Rather than sinking more money into it.
Right. Yeah, I think it's part of a larger discussion that we need to have with the Board of Ed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, it's a no doubt.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're moving on to DCS.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, Mayor, Council President Fox, and council members. Thank you for allowing me to present the Department of Community Services budget for 2021. I am Aaron Schrager, the acting director. What's listed there is just the disciplines that fall within Department of Community Services. We do have 3 divisions, which is Division of Public Works, the Engineering Division, and then Code and Construction. So you could scroll down. So DCS oversees some of its largest monetary asset, which is the city's infrastructure. You know, a lot of it is mostly unseen and underground, and unfortunately aging every day. But that is our primary service to the community. We could scroll down. So some key responsibilities. The slide hasn't changed much over the years. We're not expanding infrastructure, which is a good thing. We are upgrading and maintaining it. What you will see next year, we will be getting another traffic signal. So the signals will go up to 32 that we maintain at some point next year when they complete the one at River Road and Chatham Road, which is scheduled to start in February. And public buildings, parks and spaces will go to 46 because the Summit Free Market is not in that total yet. So that will go up. Otherwise, the infrastructure we maintain has stayed relatively constant for the last few years, but it's listed all right there. We can move to the next slide. So our total request for 2021 is $3.346 million. And as we prepared our budget, we kind of had 3 goals. One is to preserve and maintain our infrastructure to the best of our ability. 2 is to ensure health and safety to the general public. And 3 was to try to remain relatively flat or reduce the increase of the budget request versus this year, 2020. So if we go to the next slide. You can see some of the numbers have gone up and down, but overall we're actually down about 50,000 from this year's approved capital budget. So we were able to meet that goal. Some fluctuations that you'll see later in detail of vehicles versus building and some technology. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit of our accomplishments for this year. There was a pandemic, but it did not slow DCS down. We were fortunate that construction was able to continue through even the peak of it back in March. So we were able to finish New Providence Avenue, the Huntley Road Area Improvement Project, the Safe Streets to Transit project is actually finishing as we speak. Pine Grove Avenue is mostly done, which was a long time coming with the sidewalk. Wallace Road was a holdover, but we did the paving part this year. Elm Place was done by DPW, as was Henry Street and Franklin Place. So we were also able to update all our data to the GIS system, which in 2021 should roll out to the public and indefinitely staff. We've been working on that for a while. The DRO revisions were adopted last council meeting. We did install 3 additional all-way stops over in the Brayton School area, which have been very successful to date. And we also were able to get the traffic calming guidelines adopted that we've been working on for a little bit. So on the next slide, in regards to infrastructure, so our capital infrastructure is critical for some of the key points we take care of are pedestrian and vehicular safety, maintaining the city property values, keeping expenses down for future infrastructure. And with that, it's, one thing we could speak to is the micro Pave program, trying to get the most bang out of our buck for maintaining our infrastructure to avoid, sewer failures or need for a full roadway reconstruction. So that's what we do with capital money and for emergency services. The next slide, we talk a little bit about pedestrian safety. So the engineering division is responsible for ADA compliance. We've been installing a lot of these crosswalk beacons, also known as a RRFB, which is a rapid rectangular flashing beacon. So we've added those quite a few of them over the years. Increased crosswalk visibility, maintaining sidewalks, and then upgrading lighting throughout the downtown. The city-owned lights, which is primarily in the downtown area. Obviously, outside is JCP&L leased lights. If we move to the next slide, some of our infrastructure, stormwater and sewer systems. Obviously the sanitary sewer is technically separate under the sewer utility, but for storm stores, we always keep this slide because this is a Waldron Avenue, which we did some significant work on about 7 or 8 years ago at this point. A lot of our storm systems are 100 years old. So there's constant need for upgrades. It impacts the health and safety when you have flash flooding like that. So we do try to correct that where we can through our drainage improvement projects, or as we do capital projects on certain streets, we'll do the drainage upgrades as well. Moving to the next slide. Talk about our capital project goals is roads to improve the road conditions, reliability, and safety. Storm stores, reduce flooding, extend the infrastructure, and decrease the overloading of our systems. And then traffic calming and sidewalks, which both have gained a lot of steam over the last few years. So we're excited to do our first true sidewalk project in 2021, which was 2020 funding, but we'll get that rolled out then. And traffic calming in conjunction with the safety committee and police department is something that's come to the forefront the last few years, which is both necessary and exciting. So moving to the next slide, just a couple projects that we did complete in 2020 was Franklin Place, which was suffered a lot as it needed paving, but we had the ongoing residential project there, so we waited for that to be completed. That was done in-house at a cost savings with public works staff. So that was completed, as well as the Huntley Road area project, which had some funding from Union County. Safe Streets to Transit, so that's the intersection of Summit and Broad right there, and that will, in addition to the safety grip surface installed within the intersection box, There's lighting that is, should have been installed today. If not, it's being installed right now. So that will be a lighted area, because that will, at least pre-pandemic, had quite a bit of traffic going to and from the train. We talked about New Providence Avenue, Wallace Road. Elm Place was another pedestrian safety improvement project. So a crosswalk never existed where Elm and Ashland intersected. So this was installed, kind of a hybrid combo project. So we had a contractor do some of the concrete work, and then Public Works paved Elm Place, which both good cooperation, and did save some money by not bidding out the Elm Place section of that. And Pine Grove section 2 was mostly completed recently. So, and the next slide, we talk about the requests for 2021. So in total, we do have 11 road projects, 4 cul-de-sac streets, which we've pushed off for a little bit, 2 thoroughfares, and just 5 local streets. There's a sidewalk installation project. We have some requests for pedestrian safety and traffic calming improvements, regulatory and warning sign replacement projects, minor, but we do that every year to make sure our signs are meeting the federal requirements. Some money just for state and federal stormwater regulations that we have to continually meet. Traffic signal upgrade program, we do have 31, and our whole inventory has become much more upgraded over the last few years, but it's still, some do need some work. Still have a couple old ones, and they do always need continual upgrades. Open space management is due in this year, and that's just to help in some of the areas, the pocket parks and downtown areas that there's no specific project assigned for, but that we do upgrade periodically. Micro Pave program will be implemented again. We have 13 streets selected for that. So we'll proceed with that. That's usually done in the summer. And then the Transit Village project is listed here, but it's not listed as an actual request. And there's 2 reasons to that. One, we do have some donors looking to give money to it, and we do have some money in trust that's been previously donated to the city for that. We also have a grant application before NJDOT for the Transit Village. And if you recall, the Transit Village grant did fund quadrant 3, or the southwest quadrant. So we're hopeful and optimistic that maybe we could get that grant, and then combined with some of the pledged and previously donated money, we could work something out for 2021 and then finish up the village grant. So if we could go to the next slide. This details some of the projects specifically, just by dollar cost. They're all listed in the the spreadsheets that have gone out, but this is how we do get to the 2.5 for the roadway portion of our capital requests, and they're all listed there. The roads that we do select is based off of the road rating that we do complete annually, as well as some other factors. So if we wind up with roads that are rated equally, we may factor in how is the curbing, or how is the drainage on their streets. And at times too, just the traffic volume. So a street like Park Avenue might get precedent over some of the cul-de-sac streets, but we're happy that the cul-de-sacs are in this year's budget. A few of those have been kicked in the budget down a few years, and they're really getting to that point where they need to be done. So the next slide will detail a little bit of the project timeline, because I know there's always at times some confusion about when projects happen. And I will say, in a perfect year, which does happen, I would not say this was a perfect year, but when the budget is approved, it's typically the following spring that we're actually able to do the work. Some smaller projects or equipment purchases we should be able to get done in that same budget year. But typically, when you factor in the timing of the adoption of the capital budget versus then the design work, and then the need to meet with the public and to go through the bidding stage, it's very rare that we get too many of them done in that calendar year. So for example, this year we were only able to get Elm Place done of all the projects we had, but we do anticipate a very, very busy spring, because all the 2020 projects will be completed then. So there's just a typical timeline, and it's about anywhere from, it's really the following spring that the projects would take place. So we move on to the next slide. It details the vehicle and equipment purchases we have. So DCS is responsible for the maintenance of most vehicles and equipment that the city does possess, both emergency services and our own, some Board of Education, and at times some in housing. And obviously we don't have 500 cars. Equipment can be, smaller handheld lawn blowers or lawn mowers up to, the large loader that you see at the transfer station. So, but all told, it's about 500. And for 2021, we are looking for some replacements. We do have a sidewalk snow tractor with a plow and blower attachment. That's obviously to help in the public space areas we maintain, Village Green, sidewalks that are owned by the city. The compost topsoil sweeping screener. So that's a machine that would be at the transfer station used to assist us in producing compost and topsoil from the material we do collect. Paint machine is for street painting. So the striping that you see out in the roads, it's for that. We do have, I see the compost, that's just a little error, compost screener is listed twice. The lifts is for, areas at the community center which exceed areas that we can get to with typical ladders. So we do have one lift that is pretty beat up that we use primarily in the garage right now, but we can use it. But in addition to using it, say at the community center, we also would use it at City Hall in the main atrium area to get up and clean and make repairs to areas that are higher up, such as like the main light fixtures that hang down. So, and then we do have just some maintenance and parts replacements of other vehicles and equipment. And then the final phase that we have in our budget is the buildings. So over the last 5 years, as we've kind of transitioned from being reactive to our buildings and being more proactive, as we even took a branch of Public Works and assigned them to buildings, we have identified a lot of needs for upgrades on our city's buildings and facilities. So the good thing is we're getting near the end of the major repairs that were needed to kind of bring our whole inventory up to where it needs to be. Unfortunately, we still do have a pretty big ask this year to accomplish that goal. So if we can turn the, oh, I'm sorry, we have it listed there. So City Hall is 75,000. That's for some general building maintenance, but we're investigating a lot of some electrical issues as well as some of the air conditioning system, the internal components of the air conditioning, because we did replace the main chiller and the tower over the last few budget cycles. But this is to also help with some waterproofing at City Hall. The DPW garage is $70,000 request, and what's part of that is the garage doors at DPW are nearing the end of their useful life, and there's quite a few of them, and they are quite large. So we will be proceeding with that project, but we do have that split up to do it over numerous years, about $20,000 a year, because it all told it will be about $100,000. And at the transfer station, we did budget last year to do the lower building, which we call the compost building, but we need to replace the siding and the outer shell of the main building where we do bring our waste. It has not been upgraded in quite a long time. If you close the doors at night, you will still be able to read inside because it has that many holes. So every time one of these windstorms come through, we are just happy that it survives, but it has reached the end of its life cycle. So we do need to get this one replaced as well. There's also some money for remediation because we are still in that program as we work to develop a plan for the ultimate future of that site and how we will remediate. So all told is $580,000 for buildings. So on the next slide, we go into just the conclusion. Three primary categories. The infrastructure does have a slight decrease over the 2020 request, a larger decrease over the vehicle and equipment, and then the city buildings is up slightly, but overall we still are looking at a a little bit of a decrease over last year. So that is all for the department's general request. We do the sewer utility, which, Michael, do we want to just proceed right into that, or we want to just tackle this first, or?
Sure, we could, yeah, go ahead. Go.
Okay. So sewer utility. Now, the sewer utility, falls completely under the department, but it does have its separate budget through a user fee. So we will just jump right into that right now then. So, and the sewer essentially does convey our sewage that's collected in the city, as well as a portion from New Providence, to the joint meeting in Elizabeth. We do collect from 15,000 dwelling units or equivalent dwelling units, of which about 4,000 are from New Providence. It's overseen by a sewer operator, which currently is that capacity is served by New Providence in a shared service agreement. We have 82 miles of sewers. The average daily flow for last year was 5.22 million gallons a day. We're pretty much on par with that this year. We do have 4 pump stations with 11 total pumps, and we do have 6 pieces of equipment and vehicles assigned directly to the sewer utility. So on the next slide, we'll talk about some of the key sewer utility projects. So for last year, the sanitary sewer cleaning and TV program, which we've implemented, which has been a fantastic success. We want to keep it going. We were able to complete sections A and B early in the year, and then we have awarded sections L and N in October, and that just finished up this past week. So we should have more information to review to see if any repairs are needed in those sections of the town. Our sewer jet garage bay, which was a 2020 project, we did begin plan preparation. We were really hoping to try to use in-house staff to save some money, but it just seems it's a little more complicated than we would like. So we will have to bid some portions of it out, and that will get started next year. And then we have a vehicle replacement. We did finalize the specs in October, and that will be before council to be approved in February of next year. So for this year, you'll notice the sewer budget is up pretty significantly over last year, and the primary reason is every 3 years the city has to contribute to the joint meetings capital fund, and I'm not totally sure, but it did skip a year, so it might have been 3 or 4 or even 5 years since we last had to contribute. So there is a $973,000 request from joint meeting that we have to pay forward to them. So what we try to do typically is keep our budget requests on the lighter side when we know it's a joint meeting year. Obviously we still need some items, so we can't come in at 0, but we do try to lessen it when we know that year is here. So this is a joint meeting year, so that there is a $900,000 capital request to go to that. So if we go to the next slide. Just overall, the projects included this year, it's a decrease. There is no TV inspection project. We've been doing that on an every other year basis. And then we do have some left over that we'll probably still be able to get a project in for 2021. We don't have any major capital projects in this year's budget, so that's a decrease there. Slight increase on vehicles, as we will have a dump truck that needs replacement. And we have a pretty significant decrease on the sewer pump stations, which is primarily because we had a large budget number last year to do an overhaul at Constantine, and that project should get started next year as well. So with that concludes the overall budget for the sewer utility. So at this time, if there's questions for either, I am available.
Thank you for this presentation, Aaron. This has been very informative. Are there any questions from members of council? I don't see any, but I think we have William Thar from the one of the attendees. Would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you for recognizing me. And also thanks to Aaron for meeting with a small group of residents on Tulip Street adjacent to the Salt Brook, which drains a significant portion of Summit. But the only issue I wanted to raise is, as Aaron pointed out to us, Summit is experiencing larger and larger episodes of localized flooding, mostly not because of new construction. Most of Summit is built up, but primarily because of increased weather activity. We're all experiencing climate change, and Summit is not excluded from that. So we're seeing more intense and more frequent flooding, and we've experienced that especially along the Tulip Street corridor adjacent to the Salt Brook, especially at the intersection of Tulip and Oakland. But one of the concerns we have is that the city really takes a very hands-off position to these waterways, which actually, like the Salt Brook, which drain a significant part of our city. For example, the Salt Brook drains one of the largest areas, drainage areas in Summit, almost a square mile. Yet it's really up to individual homeowners to maintain that waterway. So what we would really like to see is the city to take more responsibility in maintaining these waterways and working with the residents and beginning to plan as a part of their capital budgets, maintenance of waterways, which are now actually being used as public drainage sites rather than private ownership of waterways. So just as we share responsibility for the streets, I think the city needs to begin to share responsibility for improvement and any capital development that needs to be done along these major drainage waterways. And I'd like to, certainly like to see these begin to be built into the capital budgets for the departments. But perhaps, some initial funding ought to be proposed by the Department of Public Works so that we can, assess the level of the problems and issues that exist with these waterways. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Thar, can you just also state your address for the record, please?
Yeah, 51 Tulip Street.
Thank you. And Aaron, did you have a response to that? Or is this something we can discuss?
No, I can, Council President, and through you. So after we had met Mr. Thar, we did bring it to the Capital Projects Committee, and we have started some discussions on the topic, and we have some ideas that we're investigating. I don't have much information for you now because it's still preliminary, but we have kicked around some ideas that we are pursuing and seeking some legal opinions on. So, our meeting definitely did help get the ball rolling, and we are investigating some things. In regards to your specific situation, as I had said, the budget does include funding for Tulip Street, which would, as a preliminary part of that, we would TV inspect and all of the storm sewers in the area, as well as complete a survey to assess them, which could contribute to some of the localized flooding that does go on there. So that would be a first step before we did any major paving or reconstruction project there. So we do kind of have the ball moving on two fronts there. And we're definitely, we're not done with what we could do with the streams that are on private property. We are still just kind of got started on that, but we will have more information soon.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. That's, the kind of response we were looking for. Please keep us informed as you develop plans in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Aaron, for that response. Let's see, Councilmember Vartan, you had a question?
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Aaron. Just a few questions. So roughly how much time does micro paving add to the life of a road on average, let's say, before it needs to be repaved completely? And is there somewhere some sort of a cost or an estimated cost savings for the micro paving program? Because my impression is that it saved us quite a lot over the years, and I'm just trying to gauge what that exactly what might be.
Yes, it does. So typically it's I'd like to say 7 to 8 years, and you could get more. I mean, every road is different depending on the use of it or how much damage might be to the subsurface that you can't see. Because before we apply the surface, Public Works does go out and fix any patches or utility patches were there to make sure it has a sound base to adhere to. But if the extent of that was far greater than we thought, then even the micropave might not last forever. But we're assuming 7 to 8 years, and it does. There's a way we could get you some cost to have just to use as a tool, but every road is different. But there's definitely a significant cost savings by utilizing it, and primarily it just postpones when a full paving would be needed. So it's probably at about a third or a quarter of the cost of a paving. So.
Thank you. Excellent. And then there's $150,000 in the budget for pedestrian safety improvement project. Is that just sort of general for the potential that will identify where they will be, or are there specific ones already in mind?
It is something that's somewhat general that we do put in every other year, but that said, we have had no shortage of projects to utilize, whether it is some of these upgrades at signalized intersections or the addition of the flashing beacons at others, street signs. And then in the past, we had used it for some sidewalk projects. So we definitely have no shortage that we could use that for.
Thank you.
You mentioned that this is going to be the first sidewalk project in 21. Where is that going to be located? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Right. So in terms of being the first, obviously we've done sidewalk before, but it's utilizing the funding that was approved in 2020. So it would be the first sidewalk project that's being implemented after we adopted the sidewalk plan, which was last year. So yes, there has been some sidewalks done in the past, or even Pine Grove, but it's a standalone sidewalk project to help meet the intent of the sidewalk installation guideline and plan. Right now, we have approximately 8 locations we'll be looking at. So the plan is to take essentially a spreadsheet of the locations with costs, potential challenges, benefit, and to bring that to both the Safety and CAPS Committee, and we'll decide, because unfortunately money will only go so far, but we do have 8 locations we're currently looking at. I will just say one is to the Arboretum. There's a section on Broad Street. There's some in the Mount Vernon area. So there is a list of 8 that we are kicking around. All were identified in the plan that was adopted, but then the 8 specifically were either on school routes or there had been some either residents or champions for these areas.
And these are not coupled with road projects then? They're standard?
No, not the ones we are looking at, yes. We'll always try to do sidewalk with road projects. An example would be last year we funded Edgar Street. Edgar Street has a sidewalk gap that was in the plan. So as we pave Edgar Street this spring, we'll be adding that section of sidewalk. So it wouldn't be standalone, it'll be part of that capital project.
Thank you for the clarification. And by the way, Pine Grove looks great. So thank you for all your work to make that one happen. I know that was a heavy lift.
It was, but I was there on a rainy day and I was happy to see 19 people on the sidewalk. So that's when you know a sidewalk was needed, when people are using it immediately. So
people are using it, definitely.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from members of council? Okay. Any comments or questions from members of the public? Well, thank you so much for this presentation. So
thank you.
Is there I guess, do we have more?
Yes, I know this is the point in the presentation everyone looks forward to hearing about expensive parking service projects. But this year, we're going to stay at a zero. I hope there's no unexpected projects at this time, but or in the early part of next year. But there's really nothing to speak about in parking services in terms of capital projects. So we can move on to the. I mean, this is really the section that we love to talk about. And this year, I'm going to let our CFO, Tammy Baldwin, play the role of Debbie Downer and talk about our debt position and just give a sort of perspective, given that we fund and finance our capital projects with debt. We always like to end the presentation just to kind of bring some perspective to how we look at our capital improvement plan and how we have to consider past capital budget debt financing, as well as what we look at in the future. So I will hand it off to Tammy to finish this off.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, Council President, Mayor, and members of Council. I would argue that it's not Debbie Downer, that it's more of a reality check. But I find the numbers exciting, so I'll take you through these slides. To begin with, our net debt on our annual debt statement, January 1, 2020, we were at $54.795 million. When we add in, or I'm sorry, when we subtract what we paid in our debt service payments in the 2020 budget, we paid out $4,662,000. That reduced that debt service. We then had capital projects that were approved for $4.189 million, and that resulted in new debt authorizations in the form of bands, bond anticipation notes at the moment, of $4,023,000. If you recall, the reason why that's a little bit lower in terms of the debt authorized as to what was approved, that there is typically a 5% down payment required in the regular municipal operating budget. That brings us to an estimated net debt at the end of 2020 of $54.156 million. And we have a 2021 projected debt service payments of $4.871 million. That's on our debt service schedule and will be in the 2021 budget. We move on to the next slide. It shows in detail our existing debt service schedule as it stands now, up to including projects that were approved in 2020. So it's broken down by principal and interest. Most projects have a useful life. Anywhere from, they can go from 5 to 30 years, typically around 20 is a typical useful life. These are all broken down by their actual useful lives. And this is what we are looking at as we stand today with the projects that are approved for the coming 6-year capital improvement plan. This is where we stand over the next 6 years before the capital improvement plan that we've discussed tonight. Moving on to the next slide, we are taking that projected debt service from the prior slide as it stands now, and we are adding in the firehouse estimate of debt. As you know, while the project's been approved, we haven't funded that yet. So I'll bring you down to the row that says new firehouse estimated debt service. What you'll see is, if we were to go ahead and talk about funding that through a bond anticipation note, which are 1-year notes that are rolled over, we would have no payment on that note until 2022. That's why the first year you see a payment of $275,000. These are presumed at 2.5%, which is the going rate on a bond anticipation note right now. And you can do that for 2 years. In the 3rd year, you're required by bond law to roll it into permanent financing, which is why you see the jump from 2023 of 275,000 to 2024, where it would go up to 700,000. That's the permanent financing. This is based on 2.46% true interest cost and over a 20-year useful life. So when you factor all that in, it brings you down to the bottom row there, which shows our estimated debt service payments, including the estimates for the new firehouse. In this slide here, we take those numbers, roll them forward in that top row, and then the second row, you see proposed capital improvement plan. This is the plan that all of the department heads have discussed with you tonight for 2021. That amount is $5,278,000. As required, it's carried out over the 6 years. But if we focus on 2021, if we were, I think the next slide actually shows you, we have estimated debt service at the bottom, which is where we are now of 4.871 million. If you look at the third row, just up from the bottom, this is the same premise as the firehouse. You would be taking those, if we were to fund all of those projects, we said, yeah, they're all great. We're going to approve every project that was discussed at its full amount of $5,278,000. We would be looking at a bond anticipation note for 2 years. Then we would start to be looking at the permanent financing. Again, these estimated numbers were on a 2.5% for a bond anticipation note, the going rate, and a 2.46 true interest cost on the permanent bond financing. And you'll see that the numbers go up over the years because you're getting into the permanent financing and you're adding other years' plans into that permanent financing. So I know it's kind of a lot and it's a lot of numbers, but I hope this makes some sort of sense for everybody and gives you a little bit of a better picture from a debt service and financial standpoint of where we would be if we were to go ahead with all of the projects proposed. And I will take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you for that presentation. That was very very enlightening. Councilmember Hairston, did you have a comment?
I do. Thank you, Tammy. And first, thank you, Council President. And this is an area of interest for me in understanding how our rating will be impacted by this. And I'm not sure if Tammy can discuss this in a way that can enlighten the public on this. But I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Please, if you can tell me what your thinking is about how this will improve or keep it the same. I'm anxious to hear.
So I'll give you my 2 cents on my knowledge, and then of course Michael is also a bit of a finance guru, so he can jump in and add to that. Summit is in a great position, as you know, AAA rated with bonding, which helps us greatly in the bond sales that we do. It keeps our interest rates in a good place and enables us to do projects at potentially lower interest costs than other municipalities who are not privileged with that rate. When I have been involved over the years in my career in phone calls and bond ratings with the bond rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, typically they're not just looking at your debt and where you are. They want to know that you are investing in your infrastructure, that you've got economic development going on, that you've got redevelopment sometimes there's a whole host of factors that go into how they rate you. They do look at your fund balance. They do look at your debt service. The goal from a CFO perspective and from a budgeting perspective, I think, is to always try to keep your debt service where you can pretty even keeled. You're going to have a little bit of spikes and a little bit of valleys, but what you want to do is when you are retiring some debt, you know, one of your bonds has been paid off, that's the time to take on a little more. So it's kind of slow and steady wins the race. If you keep that number relatively steady, you're in a good position. But I think the short answer is that it's not just the level of your debt service, it's a host of factors that the bond rating agencies look at to determine.
Thank you. Councilmember Naidu, did you have a question?
More of a question / comment, I think. But first, thank you, Tammy, for doing this forward-looking projection. Obviously, there's many things that can change over time. And so I think we all appreciate the fact that, you know, these aren't numbers written in stone. But I do think one of the numbers that we do know may change and change in the adverse is we currently get, as part of a settlement with Atlantic Health Systems, a certain amount of money per year. Can you just remind everyone when, or you or Michael, when that ends?
It ends in 2023.
Okay. So if everyone looks at that chart and realizes there's a significant chunk of money that will disappear from automatically, obviously by that time, there's other factors that could come into play, but we should be cognizant of the fact that there is a stream of money that offsets residential taxes right now that will come to an end. At the same time that we can see a rise in our debt service payment that will put a squeeze, obviously, on how much the operating budget is if we want to try to stay within certain parameters. Otherwise, it's increases in taxes. There's somewhere that has to give, and that goes back to my original comment about recognizing that we have to be trimming this budget, but also about what I previously said, and I know I sound like a broken record, about what the fire station has a big impact in everybody else's budget for capital. And that's just reality. That's just, we have to, numbers don't lie. They are what they are. And we just have to accept that and figure out ways around it in order to make sure that we don't overburden the residents for taxes. Thank you.
Tammy, I'm wondering, these numbers on showing the debt service, are those premised on if we just fund the 2021 requests, or if we fund all the requests going out the 6 years?
No, right now, those are premised on funding 2021. So, and you'll see, like, I forgot to mention that you start to see, like, in 2026, one of our bonds is retired. So you see that drop from 6.288 to 5.976. So this takes into account those projects for 2021.
Got it. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Are there any other questions or comments that people have? Okay, I don't see any other comments. So thank you all for doing. I believe that's the end of our program for tonight.
That's the end of the.
Oh wait, it is not, because Councilmember Barten's got his hand up. Go ahead.
All right, we were this close and now I'm ruining it.
All right.
I'm ruining it, and you can blame me. We skipped over the joint dispatch center. There's $200,000 in the capital budget for next year. I was just wondering if we could chat about, very briefly, what that is and what our ratio of that project is in comparison to the other municipalities that we share it with.
Right. Good question, Councilman. So the Joint Dispatch Board approved the 2021 budget last month, and that includes a capital project section that amounts to, my recollection, might have been somewhere, I think it's about 570,000 or so. Our portion of the budget, the assessment, is roughly 39%. And so that 200,000, from the joint dispatch perspective, they are assessing based on that percentage that we have at 39% of the total, their total budget. And then they have a capital budget section within that budget. Now, they don't have the capacity to borrow. So the municipalities, respective municipalities are looking at, and then this is how I'm looking at it, is they're looking to fund their workstation computer replacement. There's a lot of infrastructure, technology infrastructure there that needs to be replaced after, now you're going into your 6th year of operation. And they're looking at it as here's everyone's assessments of the 3 communities. 200,000 represents our portion, and these are capital requests that are well beyond the 5-year useful life that we can finance it. So we're proposing putting that amount in there. It's a one-time capital, non-reoccurring capital project request, and it's just a portion of the overall amount that they requested through their budget.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. I think it's important to just remember for everyone in the community to remember that we in joining with other municipalities. The hope is that we're saving money on this in the long term. But I'm assuming that, whether it's 5 years or 7 or 10 years, this kind of a appropriation or borrowing may have to pop up again for that. So just something to keep our eye on.
Yep.
Well.
Okay. Are there any other questions before we adjourn? Thank you to Michael and to Tammy and to all the department heads who have put in a tremendous amount of work to put this all together. And this is just the beginning of the process. Just a reminder to those of you out there in the public that this is kind of the starting point, and now we go through the process of really looking at what can be pushed off to future years and really making the tough choices. So this is not at all set in stone. There's going to be a lot more work that happens before we finish this process. And when you hear from us about the budget again, I guess in February. So with that, unless anyone has anything else to say, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, department heads, Michael, Tammy.
Thank you, everyone.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Excellent visuals.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
Thank you.